The starship Avalon, a state-of-the-art vessel owned by the Homestead Company, is on a 120-year journey to Homestead 2, a habitable colony planet. This mission is part of humanity's desperate exodus from Earth, which has been rendered uninhabitable by widespread ecological collapse and biosphere degradation. Aboard the ship are over 5,000 colonists and 238 crew members, all in hibernation pods designed to sustain them in suspended animation until they awaken 4 months before reaching their destination. The Avalon is equipped with advanced technology, including an energy shield that automatically redirects to protect against asteroid impacts. However, as the ship passes through a dense asteroid field, the shield becomes overwhelmed by a torrent of debris. A large piece of space rock breaches the shield, colliding with critical ship components. This collision causes a cascading system failure that inadvertently awakens one passenger, Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer 90 years ahead of schedule. Jim emerges from his pod disoriented, but initially unaware of the full extent of his predicament. After exploring the ship, he realizes with growing dread that he is the only one awake. All attempts to contact Earth prove futile. Any message would take 19 years to reach, and a response would take 55 years. His low-level worker ID badge severely restricts his access to the ship's resources and facilities, leaving him confined to limited living quarters and basic meal options. His situation becomes even more bleak when he discovers that the hibernation pods are beyond repair, leaving no possibility of returning to stasis. Determined to understand his situation, Jim immerses himself in the ship's engineering manuals and attempts to breach the fortified bridge, hoping to find answers. However, the door is impenetrable without high-level clearance. Alone for over a year, he tries to maintain his sanity by distracting himself with the ship's entertainment systems, playing video games, shooting hoops, and engaging in virtual dance-offs. He upgrades himself to a luxury suite, but the isolation becomes unbearable. His only companion is Arthur, a charming android bartender programmed to provide conversation and comfort, though his interactions lack true emotional depth. The crushing loneliness eventually drives Jim to despair. After a failed attempt to break into the bridge, he contemplates suicide by opening an airlock without a spacesuit. However, at the last moment, he hesitates, unable to go through with it. One day, while wandering the hibernation bay, Jim notices Aurora Lane, a beautiful and vivacious journalist still in stasis. Fascinated by her video profile, he learns about her aspirations to write a groundbreaking story about the colonization of Homestead 2 and her witty, adventurous personality. Consumed by loneliness, Jim wrestles with a moral dilemma, whether to wake Aurora for companionship, effectively condemning her to the same fate he faces. After confiding in Arthur, he makes the fateful decision to awaken her, fabricating a story that her pod malfunctioned just like his. Aurora initially believes Jim's explanation and, like him, goes through the stages of shock, frustration, and despair. She desperately searches for a way to re-enter hibernation, but her efforts are fruitless. Over time, she begins to adapt to her new reality. She channels her emotions into writing a book about her experience and starts to bond with Jim, who shares the joys and struggles of his past year of solitude. Together, they explore the ship, enjoy romantic dinners, play games, and even venture outside the ship on breathtaking spacewalks. Aurora, a gold-class passenger, introduces Jim to the privileges her status affords, including access to luxurious amenities like gourmet food, premium coffee, and a swimming pool. As their relationship deepens, the two fall in love, sharing dreams of what life on Homestead 2 could have been. However, their happiness is shattered when Arthur inadvertently reveals the truth about Aurora's awakening, that Jim deliberately woke her up. Aurora is devastated by the betrayal and accuses Jim of stealing her future, equating his actions to murder. She distances herself from him, harboring anger and grief even as the ship begins experiencing worsening malfunctions. The malfunctions culminate in a terrifying incident where Aurora is nearly killed in the swimming pool during a sudden loss of gravity. Shortly afterward, another hibernation pod fails, awakening Gus Mancuso, a chief deck officer. Gus, though suffering from severe physical deterioration due to his pod's failure, uses his high-level access to investigate the ship's issues. He discovers that the asteroid collision from 2 years earlier caused significant damage to the ship's fusion reactor, resulting in cascading failures across critical systems. If left unaddressed, these issues will lead to the complete breakdown of the ship, dooming everyone aboard. During their collaboration, Gus learns that Jim awakened Aurora. While Gus does not condone Jim's actions, he empathizes, describing Jim as a drowning man desperate for a lifeline. Gus's health rapidly deteriorates due to pansystemic necrosis caused by prolonged exposure to his malfunctioning pod. Before his death, Gus provides Jim and Aurora with his ID badge and crew access codes, entrusting them with the task of saving the ship. Using Gus's clearance, Jim and Aurora trace the source of the malfunctions to a hull breach near the reactor. The damage has critically compromised the ship's power plant, which is on the verge of a catastrophic plasma overload. In a desperate attempt to avert disaster, Jim ventures outside the ship to manually vent the reactor while Aurora operates the controls from within. As the venting process progresses, a massive explosion hurls Jim into space. Aurora, realizing she cannot bear to lose him, risks her own safety to retrieve him. Using the autodock, she successfully revives a clinically dead Jim. With the reactor stabilized, the Avalon resumes normal operation. Jim discovers that the autodock can function as a hibernation pod for one person. He offers Aurora the chance to return to stasis, ensuring she will survive the journey to Homestead 2. However, Aurora decides to remain awake, unwilling to spend the rest of her life without him. The two reconcile and commit to building a life together aboard the ship. 88 years later, the Avalon's passengers awaken to a transformed environment. The once sterile concourse is now a thriving ecosystem, complete with a massive tree, lush vegetation, birds, and a cabin that Jim and Aurora built together. Aurora's recorded memoir recounts their extraordinary journey, celebrating their love, resilience, and ability to create meaning in an otherwise impossible situation.